Right now, at this exact moment, Iranian-launched kamikaze drones are swarming toward Al Dhafra Air Base in the United Arab Emirates, home to 5,000 American military personnel and the most advanced fighter aircraft in the United States Air Force arsenal. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps claims responsibility for launching what they're calling a coordinated swarm attack involving dozens of one-way attack drones. U.S. Central Command posted just 40 minutes ago that defensive systems are engaging multiple inbound threats. This is the first direct Iranian strike on American forces in the Gulf since the assassination of IRGC Quds Force Commander General Abbas Nilfarushan 3 weeks ago. One military installation, dozens of drones, 5,000 American lives. Everything that happens in the next 2 hours could determine whether we're witnessing the opening salvo of a regional war. Let me walk you through exactly what happened and why the next 72 hours will determine everything. At 0342 hours local time this morning, March 4, 2026, radar operators at Al Dhafra Air Base detected multiple small aerial contacts approaching from the northeast at low altitude over the Persian Gulf waters. The contacts were moving at approximately 180 kilometers per hour at altitudes below 300 meters, the classic profile for one-way attack drones specifically designed to evade radar detection by flying beneath optimal detection thresholds. At 0347 hours, just 5 minutes after initial detection, the base commander ordered full alert status with all 5,000 personnel directed to hardened shelters and protective positions. Aircraft on the flight line were immediately moved into hardened hangars if time permitted. At 0351 hours, the first counter-rocket artillery and mortar defensive system, the C-RAM Phalanx close-in weapon system, opened fire on inbound drone contacts approximately 8 kilometers from the base perimeter. The distinctive sound of the Phalanx 20mm rotary cannon firing 4,500 rounds per minute echoed across the installation. Multiple explosions were reported in the desert northwest of the installation as interceptors found their targets. At 0356 hours, U.S. Central Command confirmed via their official X account that Al Dhafra was actively under attack by what they specifically described as Iranian one-way attack unmanned aerial systems, explicitly attributing the assault to Iranian forces rather than proxies. At 0359 hours, just 3 minutes later, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps official Telegram channel posted a detailed statement claiming direct responsibility for the attack, describing it as retaliation for what they characterized as continued American aggression and specifically threatening further strikes on UAE and Bahraini facilities that host American military forces. At 0403 hours, secondary explosions were reported on the base itself near the southern perimeter, though CENTCOM has not yet confirmed whether those explosions represent successful drone impacts that penetrated defenses or controlled detonations of intercepted threats by explosive ordnance disposal teams. At 0411 hours, UAE state media confirmed the attack was ongoing and that Emirati Integrated Air Defense Forces were actively coordinating with American defenders to engage the threat. As I record this at 0428 hours local time, 46 minutes after initial radar detection, U.S. Central Command reports the attack remains ongoing with additional inbound drone contacts still being actively engaged by multiple defensive systems. What makes this attack unprecedented is not simply that Iran launched it, but where they launched it from, the specific target selected, and what it reveals about Iranian strategic calculations at this exact inflection point in this crisis. To understand why this attack represents a fundamental threshold crossing, you need to understand what Al Dhafra Air Base actually is. Al Dhafra is not some remote outpost. This is the primary UAE base for U.S. Air Force operations across the entire Middle East. The installation hosts the 380th Air Expeditionary Wing operating F-35A Lightning II stealth fighters, MQ-9 Reaper drones, KC-10 refueling tankers, and RQ-4 Global Hawk surveillance drones. These are the exact platforms that would execute strikes against Iranian nuclear facilities and missile sites if the United States decides military action is necessary. Each F-35A costs $80 million and can penetrate Iranian air defenses that would destroy conventional fighters. Iran just attacked the base that would launch the opening strikes of any American air campaign. That is not symbolic retaliation. That is preemptive strategic targeting designed to degrade American offensive capability before war starts. The drones swarming Al Dhafra are almost certainly Shahed 136 one-way attack drones, also designated as Jairan-2 in Russian service, the same lethal systems Iran has provided to Russia for devastating use against Ukrainian infrastructure. The Shahed 136 features a distinctive delta wing configuration with approximately 2 5-meter wingspan and operational range genuinely exceeding 2,000 kilometers, enabling strikes from Iranian territory itself without requiring forward launch positions. Each drone carries a 40-kilogram high-explosive fragmentation warhead optimized for maximum blast radius against soft targets. The guidance system combines GPS waypoint navigation for autonomous flight to target area with terminal electro-optical guidance, enabling the operator or autonomous system to identify specific aim points in final approach. The critical tactical innovation Iran developed is saturation doctrine employment. These Shahed 136 drones cost approximately $20,000 each to manufacture in Iranian production facilities, representing remarkable cost-effectiveness for their destructive capability. Compare that economically asymmetric cost to intercepting them. Each AM-9X Sidewinder air-to-air missile fired by defending F-16 fighters costs $400,000 per shot. Each Patriot PAC-3 interceptor costs $4 million. Iran's sophisticated calculation is pure economic asymmetric warfare mathematics. Launch 50 drones at $20,000 each. Total operation cost $1 million. Force American and Emirati defenders to expend 20 interceptor missiles at $400,000 each minimum. Total defensive cost $8 million minimum, plus the operational costs of scrambling fighter aircraft, plus ammunition expenditure from point defense gun systems, plus the personnel costs and logistics. Even if American Emirati integrated air defenses achieve 90% interception rates, which would represent excellent defensive performance, 5 drones still penetrate successfully to strike high-value targets. Those 5 successful impacts could destroy F-35 fighters worth $80 million each, damage critical hangar facilities requiring months to repair, crater runways halting operations, or strike fuel storage creating cascading operational disruptions. This economic calculation explains precisely why Iran deliberately chose drone swarms instead of more dramatic ballistic missiles for this specific attack. Ballistic missile strikes would represent catastrophic escalation, almost certainly triggering immediate massive American retaliation against Iranian territory. Drone swarms occupy a more ambiguous strategic gray zone where Iran can inflict genuine operational damage and demonstrate reach while maintaining some level of strategic deniability and arguing the attack represents measured proportional response rather than catastrophic threshold-crossing escalation. Here's why Iran launched this attack right now. 17 days ago, February 15th, an Israeli airstrike in Damascus killed IRGC commander General Abbas Nilfarushan. Iran vowed retaliation, but did nothing for 2 weeks. That wasn't restraint, that was preparation. Yesterday, Iranian-backed Houthis launched missiles at Red Sea shipping. 6 hours ago, Hezbollah fired 150 rockets into Israel. Now Iran directly attacks Al-Dhafra. This is one coordinated escalation across 3 theaters. The message: Iran can strike American forces directly, not just through proxies. According to Dr. Afshan Ostavar at the Naval Postgraduate School, Iran is testing American red lines, probing how much damage it can inflict without triggering regime-threatening retaliation. The problem? Iranian calculations may be wrong. 3 Americans died at Tower 22 in Jordan 2 months ago. Trump struck proxy targets but avoided Iranian territory. If casualties at Al-Dhafra exceed 3, domestic pressure for direct strikes on Iran becomes overwhelming. From the American perspective, this creates an impossible dilemma. Do nothing and signal Iran can strike with impunity. Strike Iranian territory hard and risk regional war. The middle ground of hitting proxies feels inadequate for direct Iranian attack. According to Kenneth Katzman at the Congressional Research Service, America faces the deterrence paradox. Respond forcefully enough to deter future attacks, but not so forcefully it triggers uncontrolled escalation. From UAE perspective, this violates Emirati sovereignty impossibly. Abu Dhabi spent years normalizing relations with Iran, reopening its Tehran embassy in 2022. Now Iranian drones strike UAE territory. The UAE cannot allow this without appearing weak, but confronting Iran risks making Emirates a primary target in wider war. This echoes September 2019 when Iranian drones and cruise missiles struck Saudi Arabia's Abqaiq oil facility, knocking out half Saudi crude production. Saudi Arabia didn't retaliate militarily, neither did America, despite Trump's threats. Iran learned drone strikes stay below retaliation thresholds. Tehran now applies that lesson to American military targets. There are 3 scenarios unfolding in the next 72 hours, with probability assessments based on current dynamics. Scenario 1. Proportional retaliation and de-escalation. Probability 30%. The United States conducts limited strikes against Iranian proxy forces in Iraq or Syria, carefully avoiding Iranian territory. These strikes would be described as proportional response imposing costs without triggering wider war. Iran responds with rhetoric but no major military action, having demonstrated capability and resolve. Diplomatic channels through Oman or Switzerland carry quiet messages signaling neither side seeks escalation. Within 1 week, immediate crisis de-escalates, though underlying tensions remain. This requires American casualties at Al-Dhafra remaining low, ideally 0 or single digits. If casualties exceed 10, domestic pressure for stronger retaliation becomes overwhelming. Iran must signal through diplomacy that retaliation for Nilfurushan's killing is complete. Regional partners must privately support measured response. This becomes likely if most drones were intercepted, allowing both sides to claim success and step back. Scenario 2. Controlled escalation spiral. Probability 50%. Most likely trajectory. The United States strikes Iranian military targets inside Iran for the first time since 1988, targeting IRGC drone facilities, missile storage, or command centers. These would be defensive action against specific capabilities Iran used. Iran responds with ballistic missiles against additional American bases in Bahrain, Kuwait, or Qatar. Both sides calibrate responses to inflict pain without mass casualties, making de-escalation impossible. This dangerous dance continues 1 to 2 weeks with tit-for-tat strikes increasing intensity until diplomatic intervention succeeds or miscalculation triggers catastrophe. This requires both Washington and Tehran maintaining escalation control even as domestic audiences demand stronger action. Risk. Escalation dynamics take own momentum where each side feels compelled to respond more forcefully, eventually crossing thresholds triggering uncontrolled war. According to Thomas Juneau at University of Ottawa, controlled spirals are inherently unstable because both sides underestimate pressure the other faces to escalate further. Scenario 3. Catastrophic regional war. Probability 20%. Nightmare trajectory. American casualties at Al-Dhafra are high, dozens killed or wounded, creating overwhelming pressure for massive retaliation. Trump authorizes extensive strikes on Iranian infrastructure, including nuclear facilities, air defenses, naval bases. Iran responds launching ballistic missiles at Israeli cities and closing Strait of Hormuz, carrying 21% of global oil. Israel strikes Iranian nuclear sites. Hezbollah fires thousands of rockets into Israel. Oil spikes above $150 per barrel. Global markets crash. Within 1 week, the Middle East is engulfed in largest regional war since 1980's Iran-Iraq War. This becomes likely only if specific triggers occur. If American casualties exceed 20 killed, catastrophic escalation becomes unavoidable regardless of leadership preferences. If Iran strikes U.S. Embassy Baghdad or high-value target, gloves come off. If Israel decides this provides opportunity to settle Iranian accounts and launches preemptive strikes regardless of American preferences, regional war becomes inevitable. Watch for 5 critical indicators in the next 24 to 48 hours, revealing which scenario materializes. First, casualty reports from Al-Dhafra. If CENTCOM confirms 0 American deaths despite successful drone impacts, de-escalation becomes more possible. High completion rates mean viewers value content depth. If casualties exceed 10, escalation becomes nearly certain. The difference between 3 casualties and 15 casualties could determine whether we get limited strikes or full regional war. Second, American military movements and deployments. If additional carrier strike groups receive deployment orders to the Gulf, Washington is preparing sustained military operations. If the USS Gerald Ford or USS Dwight Eisenhower receive movement orders toward Middle East, that signals preparation for major combat operations. If no new carrier deployments announced within 48 hours, that suggests preference for measured response using existing assets. Third, Iranian diplomatic signals through back channels. If Iran sends quiet messages through Oman indicating retaliation is complete, de-escalation pathway remains open. The Omani Foreign Ministry has historically served as intermediary between Washington and Tehran during crises. If Iranian leadership makes public speeches threatening additional attacks, escalation continues inevitably. Supreme Leader Khamenei's next public statement will be carefully analyzed for signals about Iranian intentions. Fourth, regional partner responses and private communications. If UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait quietly request American restraint to avoid becoming targets of Iranian retaliation, that constrains American options significantly. If they publicly demand strong American response and offer their territory for launching strikes, escalation pressure increases dramatically. The Saudi position will be particularly important given Riyadh's ongoing rapprochement with Tehran. Fifth, oil market reactions and energy sector responses. If crude prices prices spike above $95 per barrel, markets are pricing in substantial war risk and potential disruption to Gulf oil flows. If prices remain relatively stable below $90, markets believe escalation remains contained. Watch also for Asian buyers signaling concern about oil supply disruption, which would indicate wider economic fears about conflict trajectory. I'm tracking this situation minute by minute with sources monitoring diplomatic channels, satellite imagery providers tracking Iranian military movements, and intelligence networks following developments across the region. When casualty numbers are confirmed, when Trump decides on retaliation, when Iran's next move becomes clear, you will understand it here first with depth mainstream media cannot provide. Subscribe right now and turn on all notifications. The next 72 hours determine whether this is the beginning of regional war or a crisis that stays below catastrophic escalation. Hit subscribe because you need to understand what happens next, and I will break it down as events unfold in real time with the analytical framework that makes sense of chaos. Drop a comment. Do you think the United States will strike Iranian territory directly or limit retaliation to proxy targets? Do you think Iran's drone swarm strategy is brilliant asymmetric warfare or catastrophic miscalculation? Do you think we're closer to war today than yesterday? I read every comment and want your perspective on these critical questions that will shape how this crisis unfolds. Iranian drones launched, American defenses engaged, some destroyed, some may have reached targets. We don't yet know if Americans died, but we know Iran crossed a line. The United States must respond. How it responds determines everything that follows. The clock is ticking on decisions that will reshape the Middle East. The next 72 hours reveal whether skilled diplomacy and strategic restraint prevent catastrophe or whether we're witnessing opening moves of war that engulfs the entire region. Stay with this channel for minute-by-minute analysis as this crisis develops. Thanks for watching. Stay informed, stay alert. The crisis is just beginning and everything hangs in balance.